Before I actually start, I thought I'd just let you know what this picture is on the front slide here of the presentation. It's actually at one of our mining operations, one of our mechanized mining operations that is using ultra-low mechanized mining equipment. And it actually allows drilling to happen on the face in the danger zone using machines as opposed to exposing people in that danger zone. So it greatly reduces the hazards that workers get exposed to. The guy that you see operating the machine is obviously operating it via a remote control unit, and he can sit in an area that has already been supported and made completely safe. So just by the use of this sort of technology, it's one of the ways that we've gone about improving our safety performance tremendously. So just what I'll cover today is I'll just give you a brief overview of the actual company for those of you who might not know where we operate and what we're all about. I'll then touch on just very briefly sustainability and mining. I won't go into too much detail on that. I presume you guys are all experts on that. Then I'll take you through the material sustainability issues as they relate to AngloAmerican platinum and how we define those material issues. I'll touch on our sustainability performance from 2013, which we obviously included all the detail in our 2013 sustainability report. And then I'm sure a topic that all of you would like to get more clarity on is some of the issues that underpin the 2014 strike and what that has meant for the business. And then also, lastly, just touch on what are some of the uses that platinum has in society. Maybe not all of you know that. So that's what I'll cover. I hope it meets the expectations, but anything I don't cover, please ask questions and I'll try and answer them. Okay, so just very briefly, obviously AngloAmerican Platinum is the world's largest producer of platinum. We produce about 40% of the world's newly mined platinum. We have operations predominantly based here in South Africa on the western limb of the Bushveld. We've got an open pit operation up near Mogalakwena, just south of the town of Polokwane. And then we have a number of operations and joint ventures on what we call the eastern limb, which is around the towns of sort of Burgersfort. And then we have a single operation up in Zimbabwe, the Unki Platinum Mine. We have smelting and refining operations, and they're all based in the Rustenburg area. So this next slide is just very briefly a map of that. The different colors show the blue are the wholly owned operations, the sort of stone color are the joint venture operations. And so you can see we have a number of operations on the western limb and eastern limb. And then this is our open pit operation of Mogalakwena mine. And then just outside the town of Gweru in Zimbabwe is where our Unki mine is. I thought I would spend a little bit of time just running through this busy slide. This is the company's process flow. We obviously go all the way through to the refining of platinum. We don't just mine platinum. So we have a number of underground mining operations. The bulk of our operations are actually underground mining operations. We only have the single open pit at Mogalakwena mine currently. The ore from those operations then goes through into a number of concentrator plants. And so we obviously take the big rocks from the mining, we crush them, and then once it's crushed, we put the crushed material through a flotation process where the platinum actually attaches to the bubbles that we pump through the flotation process. That material is then skimmed off and we then smelt it in a couple of smelters. We've got one smelter at Polokwane, one at Mortimer at Union Mine, and then the one in Rustenburg. And then from there, it goes into a converting process, where in the converting process, we actually drive off the sulfur associated with the ore, as well as the iron, because in the next stage of our process, we rely on a magnetic separation, and if we have iron associated with the ore still, it actually reduces our recoveries. So from then at the converter, we actually generate one of our first products, which is actually sulfuric acid, and we sell that sulfuric acid to Omnia, who then use it for fertilizer manufacture in South Africa. And I think we're the biggest supplier of sulfuric acid in the country. And then also at the concentrating phase, we also produce a large amount of chrome oxide that then gets used by the chrome industry. We have a number of BEE companies that we've set up to actually recover that chrome oxide and sell it on to the chrome smelters. So moving on down the process, at the magnetic separation, we then separate out our base metals from our precious metals. So this process now is unique for us when you look at our process versus Longman and Impala. Their process is that all their material goes through the base metal refinery first and is then to the precious metal refinery. We split out in advance of the base metal refinery. And obviously the precious metal stuff goes through to the precious metal refinery, where we produce a suite of platinum group metals. And then in the base metals, we produce all the various base metals, which include things like nickel, copper, and so on. Some useless facts that you might not know: we produce the bulk of the country's sodium sulfate. That gets used in all of our soap by Lever Brothers. So all the shampoo and the soaps and things we use, you guys are using products from Anglo Platinum. And then obviously the platinum group metals, the largest customer of ours is Johnson Matthey, and they manufacture about 30% of the world's auto catalysts here in South Africa, in Germiston. That's also a statistic that not many people know. So there's a lot of beneficiation happening in South Africa. More can happen, but it's not as though we're just simply exporting raw metal from this country. Okay. So just generally, sustainability in mining. Now, mining by its very nature is obviously a high impact game. You know, we use an extensive amount of natural resources to extract the ore. But it's our view that obviously society needs the metals that we produce. The mining industry itself has transformed tremendously globally over the last sort of 15, 20 years when it comes to actually addressing a whole number of the social and the sustainability issues. And in actual fact, these issues have become inextricably linked to normal business. You can't not manage sustainability issues when it comes to mining. They're at the forefront of actually enabling you to produce and enabling you to actually make a profit. And therefore, the sustainability issues are actually interwoven into the core aspects of the company's strategy. And this is because we're under pressure from a whole number of different internal and external sources when it comes to sustainability issues, from governments, NGOs, investors, academics, customers. The mining industry is under the spotlight, and it has been for quite some time when it comes to sustainability issues. Probably more so than businesses operating in, for example, the services sector and so on. So the mining industry has come a long way, but there still is a lot to do, still on a number of the sustainability issues. And actually I think quite a few of the leaders need to obviously actually ensure that the industry as a whole progresses on sustainability issues. And obviously through strategic platforms such as the Mining Indaba and Principles for Responsible Investment, engagements like this and engagements we have with our ESG investors on a one-on-one basis, all help formulate our ESG strategy as a business. So just in terms of AngloAmerican Platinum's material sustainability issues, we do a formal review once a year of the material sustainability issues affecting the business. And this review is done with the board, and it's done in consultation with both internal and a cross-section of external stakeholders. And we try and extract what are the material sustainability issues affecting the business. And it's not just the environmental and the social issues. It obviously includes the economic issues as well. So it's the full spectrum. And this is different to risk management. Risk management is more about what's happening at the operations and what could potentially go wrong. This is a macro view of the business that can affect the ultimate and long-term sustainability of the company. So we've come up with essentially 5 material sustainability issues. It's the ability to optimize production cost effectively and efficiently within a changing and complex business and social and political environment. Now, this is key for us, and many of you who will know the platinum sector probably realize that the platinum sector is in financial trouble. All of the platinum producers, generally, their debt levels are going up. We're under tough economic conditions. Platinum as a commodity has not recovered since the global financial crisis. Most other commodities have recovered, but platinum hasn't. So the price of platinum since 2008 has largely been staying flat. But all of the other input costs have obviously been rising and rising above inflation. So things like labor costs, electricity, water, and so on. So the margins have been eroded all the time, and as a result, the net debt of the company has been increasing significantly to the point that we have to make a change as a business. And you will see more recently in the press, that's the same for the other platinum producers. The platinum industry is in a difficult financial position, and we have to be able to make changes to our business, but in a complex social political environment. So that is undoubtedly a major material issue for us and for the way we run our business. Then we obviously have to, and as part of that, still understand and manage the stakeholder expectations on us and to bridge certain trust gaps that might exist with certain stakeholders. And this is always a balancing act. I mean, you can't please everybody all of the time, but it's important that you understand stakeholder perceptions and that those are brought into the decisions that you make in a business. Then around employee and community health and safety, that remains a priority and material issue for the business. AngloAmerican Platinum has made tremendous strides in its health and safety over the last sort of 5 or 10 years. And for those of you who follow it would have seen the improvements in metrics, but we still haven't reached our target of zero harm. In 2013, we had 7 fatalities on the operations group-wide, and the ultimate goal is obviously to get to zero. That is off, however, a benchmark or previous record, numbers of in the region of 25 to 30 fatalities a year. So there have been marked improvements with more or less the same number of employees. This year, we're currently sitting on 1 fatality year to date. And that is obviously impacted by the strike, and I'll touch on that in a bit more detail just now. And then also we need to obviously ensure that there's still access to affordable resources, things like electricity, water, and so on. And then in the South African context and globally, we have to comply with a whole number of international standards, local legislation, and those are material issues as we transform this business in the South African context. Okay, so if you want to see the aspects that are included under each of those material issues, that's what I've done in these next 2 slides. So I'm not going to read everything off the actual PowerPoint, there. But I think the key one under our ability to actually optimize the production and to make changes to the business is to actually enable us to put AngloAmerican Platinum back on a sustainable financial footing. So we need to address the company's debt levels. We announced at our interim results that debt levels had gone down to about 12.5 billion rand, and if we carry on at those same levels, the business will be in serious trouble in a few years' time. So for those of you who follow the company, you probably heard at the interims we announced certain changes to the business in terms of repositioning some of the assets, and some of the assets will be divested in the next few years. On the ability to understand and manage and meet stakeholder expectations, here we include all the various environmental and community issues. There's, I think one of the things that many people don't maybe appreciate about the platinum business is that we operate in extremely complex community environments around our operations. The bulk of our operations are actually located in former homeland areas of South Africa, where there's complex land issues because land title is often in different forms. Obviously, because of the apartheid legacy, there was a legacy of deliberate underdevelopment in those areas. So there's developmental catch-up that has to be played. So that's the context that we find ourselves in as the platinum companies, and obviously Amplat specifically as well, which is maybe unique to some of the other mining areas in South Africa where you don't necessarily have those complex legacy social issues. Then on the health and safety side, just touching on maybe something I haven't spoken about yet, but on the health side, noise-induced hearing loss is a big issue for us. We've done a lot of work to silence all of our mining equipment underground, and we've now silenced all equipment to emit less than 100 decibels so that employees won't be exposed to the noise risk. And in the years to come, we'll start seeing the benefits in the reduction in number of cases of noise-induced hearing loss. The other area where we've put tremendous focus on in the last 2 years has actually been on our tuberculosis program. 68 employees of ours lost their lives last year for not taking their tuberculosis medication. So the company makes the medication available and makes that medication available through the medical aid for free. But simply because of a lack of understanding about the importance of taking that medication and so on, that we still had 68 employees dying as a result of not taking their TB medication. So there's a huge drive on getting employees to understand the importance of taking the medication, because imagine there should be no reason why we're having any of those fatalities. The medication exists, and we can actually drive that as a company to ensure that employees take tuberculosis medication. It's obviously worth pointing out that in the platinum industry we do not have silicosis, so there's no silica associated with our mines, because often silicosis and TB go hand in hand. But in the platinum industry, that's not the case. So this is not occupational tuberculosis I'm talking about. And then there's on the resources side, electricity supply is obviously a key issue, as it is for the whole country. I think there's probably enough understanding in the room about electricity issues. And then the obligations to comply with the various international standards. And I'll touch a little bit more just now on the mining charter and how we're doing against compliance with the mining charter. Okay, so this is a very busy slide, which I'm not going to talk to line item by line item, but I'll run through the key aspects. This is an extract from the company sustainability report, which is on the website if you want more detail. But just very briefly on the health and safety side, as I said earlier, our target is actually to get to 0 fatalities, and we had 6 in 2013 and 7 in 2012. And the target is obviously to get to 0 there. As I mentioned earlier, we're on 1 fatality year to date, and although our operations, the underground operations, were closed during the strike, we actually had a lot of our supervisory and management staff still coming to work, and we still had also about a 20% turnout coming to work, and we actually used that time to make areas of the mine safer, so that when workers did return and when the strike was over, all of our workplaces were actually already safe. They had been supported, they had been inspected, the equipment was there, there hadn't been copper theft and a whole number of issues. The other positive trend just generally on our safety side is our overall total injuries, which is a metric we've only really been reporting in the last 2 years, is coming down. And that's still quite a horrific number. That means that in a year we injured 1,131 employees, total injuries. But that can include anything from just getting a plaster on your finger, through to a serious fracture or break. On the financial sustainability front, just some of our key metrics here. In 2012, we actually made a loss for the first time in many, many years, and we had to turn the business around. And in 2013, we made a small profit of about just under 2 billion rand. And So also another important point on the financial side. So even though obviously we're going through the difficult financial times, we still have to continue to reinvest capital into the business, and that's what we're doing, and the numbers are reflected there. And then just to spend a bit of time on the mining charter compliance. So we've done a review of AngloAmerican Platinum, and we've been engaging with the DMR extensively on our equity targets, and it's our view that we have done the transactions to achieve the 26% required by the mining charter, and those are transactions that have been done over many years. So when you saw that map earlier, you would have seen we had a whole number of JV operations. So we've worked with African Rainbow Minerals over the Modikwa property. We've worked with Atlatsa over the property at Bokoni mine. We've worked with RB Platts over BRPM and Staledrift. We've got at Union Mine, the community owned 15% of Union Mine, the Bakatla. And then on the remaining operations at Rustenburg, Mogalakwena, Twickenham, and Amandelbult, we've done the Alchemy transaction, where those communities own 2.3% of AngloAmerican Platinum Limited through a community participation scheme. And then we also have an ESOP, Katula, which was set up at a time that Platinum was doing well, so it hasn't necessarily delivered good returns, but that's what it means to be a shareholder in a business. You know, the business has to perform, and if the business performs, well, then other stakeholders will benefit as well. So through all of these various transactions, you know, it's our view that we've done enough to meet the mining charter requirement of the 26%. Then some of the other success stories is around our HDSA transformation and management. The company is currently sitting at 60% HDSAs in management levels, which is above our own target of 40% and the mining charter target. Then women in mining, we're at about just over 13% at the moment, and that was off a base of literally about less than 1%. Women in mining. So a huge effort went into that, into the women in mining program, and that was everything from having to address the clothing that were available for women to wear to go underground, to change houses, to ablution facilities. It was a major overhaul across the whole business to make the working environment acceptable to women. And obviously we've got ongoing programs to ensure that the underground environment in particular is a safe place for women to work. So those are just some of the mining charter issues. The other big one that we do go into a lot of detail in our sustainability report is on our procurement transformation, and that's a lot of work is still going into that. But I think it's about 45% now of all of our discretionary spend is with HDSA suppliers. Where we need to do more work is actually with local communities. So although it's HDSA companies nationwide, we still get a lot of complaints from local entrepreneurs and local communities that they aren't benefiting from the mine being on their doorstep. And so we have to actively work with a lot of the bigger suppliers to unpack their contracts to see what can actually be given to local communities to benefit from the supply chain. Just generally on community development spend in general, last year we spent about 30% of our pre-tax profit on community development. That was in the region of about 204 million rand. And so although we are doing those community projects for reasons that I mentioned earlier, the legacy of underdevelopment, we obviously often get criticized for not doing enough. But I think the needs are often yay big, and what we can do in any given year is only so big. And so that's why we have to work with communities and engage and say, look, this is how it can work over a period of time so that hopefully manage expectations. And Then just generally on some of the other metrics, our energy use and water use, we've set the targets, and we're largely achieving those targets through the various campaigns that we've got. On the energy side, we're obviously looking at all sorts of new technologies to make us more efficient as a business. Okay, so moving on to the strike specifically. The strike obviously had a huge impact on the platinum industry, let alone Anglo-American Platinum. It was a 5-month strike that started on the 23rd of January this year and ended 25th of June. And it affected pretty much all of our underground operations as Anglo-American Platinum, but not our open pit and not our joint venture operations. So in actual fact, we were still able to produce about 60% of our normal production during the strike. And and that was different to our peers in the industry who shut their refineries and their smelters down during the strike. We also, obviously, senior management realized in 2012, given the events that happened in 2012, and then the fact that we were part of a wage negotiation in 2013, that it was going to be a difficult wage negotiation. And as a result, and you would have seen, and you could do the numbers, but management anticipated the strike and built up a stock of platinum to be able to sell into the market during the strike. And this was very, very important, because as an industry and as Anglo-American Platinum, the last thing we wanted during the strike was to cause a massive spike in the platinum price, because all of that would have done was scared the users of platinum away from this metal. They would have gone and used other metals and other things. They would have substituted platinum out over time. They would have said the supply of this metal can't be guaranteed, and therefore we're going to substitute this stuff out of whatever we're using it for. So it was absolutely imperative that we as Anglo-American Platinum didn't cause a price spike during the strike. And so we engaged our customers every single week that, we've got metal, we'll be supplying you with your metal, your contracts are safe. And as a result, there was no real spike in the platinum price at all during the strike. And that was something that we felt we had to manage very, very carefully. But then by the same token, as we simply couldn't give in to the wage demands that AMCU were requesting. And irrespective of one's moral or ethical view on whether 12,500 is an affordable wage or not, I've already mentioned what the position was with respect to the debt of the business. And if we had actually met the AMCU wage demand over and above what we eventually agreed on, it would have been another 1.5 billion rand to our wage bill without any improvement in productivity or any commensurate increase with revenue. And so you just had to do the financial modeling for the businesses, and we would have been out of business if we had simply relented and given into the wage demands. And so that's why, as an industry, we had to actually find another solution to the strike. And I think that's why it dragged on for so long, because maybe there was an element of distrust between what we were saying and what the unions, and I think eventually, after the 5 months, we got to a solution that was workable for both parties. I saw my 5-minute call, so I'm not going to spend too much time. The numbers are there, so you can see it had a marked impact. We only produced about 715,000 ounces in the half year, against the similar period of last year of just under 1.2 million ounces of platinum. And you can see some of the stuff that we did on our pipeline, during the strike. Now, I think this next slide is more just about, again, and I'm not sure how many of you are aware of this, but this was data that was collected during the strike. And this just shows that there's often a perception in society, for whatever reason, that the mining industry is paying terrible wages. But when you actually look at the comparison to other sectors, the mining industry is actually paying well above other sectors. And particularly when you start looking at guaranteed pay. So there was a whole debate around, is it basic pay, is it guaranteed pay, and whatever. But anyway, to cut a long story short, this is basically where we settled. So our basic minimum wage is now 7,850 rand. That's just on basic, but then guaranteed pay. So the lowest level worker, and by the way, we've only got 5 workers on this particular level. So, this is an entry level worker, someone who's never worked in their life, can come to the mine and start earning that from day one. Okay, 12,206 rand currently. And then on top of that, they can get bonuses and other things. But so that's where we landed after the strike, against the demand of 12,500. But 12,500 was on basic pay, not on guaranteed pay. And then just you can check us against the other sectors, so steel and engineering, basic minimum wage of just under 5, and so it goes. So I think the key point here is that the mining industry, certainly in comparison to other sectors, is paying well. And the fact is also we couldn't relent and simply give into the 12,500 demand. And this is basically where all of us landed with the latest wage agreement that was signed in June. Okay, and I think that's basically it. Oh, sorry, just some of the stuff that platinum gets used for very quickly, for those of you who don't know. A lot of medical applications, so it's in pacemakers. It goes into almost all cancer treatment drugs. So if any of you've got family or are suffering from cancer, you'll probably know that platinum is in most of the drugs that actually cure cancer. And if you read Lance Armstrong's book, it's documented in there, the use of platinum. But Lance is... that part you can believe, by the way. Okay, it's also used in the oil refining industry to actually speed up chemical reactions, therefore greatly reducing the amount of energy used to refine oil. It's used in a lot of buildings now, in the sensors for air conditioners and stuff like that. That's predominantly palladium. It's used in fertilizer manufacturing. It's used on the turbines of jet engines because of its durability. It can survive volcano ash and all sorts of other stuff. Its biggest use is obviously in auto catalysts, and just maybe one arbitrary stat. Because of the use of platinum in auto catalysts now, one car today emits the same emissions as 100 cars in 1965. So that's just a useful tip or useless bit of information. And then also it's used to manufacture the glues, the glue manufacturing process for Post-its. And then obviously it helps solve world peace through engagement and jewelry and so on. So that's some of the uses for platinum. Thank you very much. Any questions? Is there still time? Okay. Great.
Thanks very much for the presentation. It's Mike Davis from Kagoda. Just trying to understand some of the labour dynamics from the mines that sites that went on strike, from those that didn't. So Mogalakwena, I think, was one. What were some of the reasons for that? What is the current representation between AMCU and NUM, say, on that or those mines? Does it differ from the Northwest, for instance, or the mines that did go on strike? And did the wage agreement also then apply to those sites, or were they already paid because of the skills base or differences that exist in the mechanised processes? Wasn't it actually applicable? Just some clarity on some of those ideas. Thanks.
Yeah. Look, obviously, the strike is highly complex, but when you look at it at, sort of face value, the operations that were on strike were those that were AMCU were the dominant union, which was our underground operations. But there's obviously reasons why our employees signed up to AMCU and followed this, demand for 12,500. And I think there's a whole number of socio-economic reasons as to why AMCU has become so entrenched in the platinum belt, and particularly on the underground mines. the underground mines are obviously quite dependent on migrant labour. They also pay live-out allowances and a whole number of other things that created a certain socio-economic environment that I think has impacted on our employees. There's all sorts of, and you would have read this, unscrupulous lending going on to those employees. Those employees were in more debt than, some of our other employees, and as a result, I think that the employees just needed the additional income, and so they followed AMCU, and obviously then went out on strike. So, but look, I mean, that's a whole socio-economic debate, and it's complex, and I'm obviously simplifying it. Then the operations that continued were the operations where NUM still is dominant. So our joint venture at BRPM is predominantly a NUM mine. Mogalakwena and our joint venture operations are all still predominantly NUM operations. And then there's also various reasons why those have remained NUM operations. So that probably answers at a relatively superficial level the first part of the question. But then the second part was, so once we signed with AMCU, then the way the labour environment works in South Africa, that agreement applied to all employees. So the fact that we had already signed with NUM and with other unions at slightly different terms and conditions, the agreement we signed with with AMCU, then everyone had to fall in line with that, because AMCU across the whole business are the majority union. So the other union members then also benefited from what AMCU had been able to put on the table. So that's how that worked, yeah.
Hi, my name is Wasim Token from Lakhai Securities. Just a bit of a follow-up question on you mentioned about the unscrupulous lenders. Is there any initiative or strategy in place whereby you guys could, to some degree, mitigate the impact of that unscrupulous lending behavior on your employees and on the community within which your employees come from? And then just the second thing is that Bobby Godsell has been quite vocal about the issue of garnishee orders and the extent to which companies were willing to allow their implementation. And do you have any views about that, or does the company have any kind of policy, or is there a change in policy in the works on that front?
Yeah. So when it comes to unscrupulous lending, we actually did a lot of work as way back as sort of 2012 on this, because it was certainly one of the issues that we felt probably led to the industrial action we had in 2012, and potentially even Marikana and stuff, without preempting what's the Farland Commission. So the company started assessing what it could do then already in 2012, and we started taking action, and actually the company would evaluate the legitimacy of a lot of the garnishee orders itself, and actually cancelled those garnishee orders for the ones that we believe hadn't been got appropriately. So that part of the work started. Then there's still a whole range of things that we're busy doing right now, and you'll probably read about some of them in the media over the next 3 weeks. But we now know, and we've been working with government, as exactly who these unscrupulous lenders are, and the company, in conjunction with other players, is going to go after these guys in the courts to try and put a stop to what we've seen. So yeah, there's a whole comprehensive program in place, and then we also obviously working with employees to give them debt counselling. We're using a company called Summit, who's doing that work for us, counselling employees. When we now receive a new garnishee order, the first thing we do is vet that it's legitimate. Before we simply just put it into our systems, the employees brought in asked whether they understand the garnishee order, and if there's not that understanding, we go back to the lender. And so we're playing a far more active role in managing that. And I mean, Bobby Godsell's quoted this as well, and I forget the exact numbers, but one of our employees ended up by paying 18,000 Rand for a cell phone. He borrowed money to buy a cell phone, and he paid 18,000 Rand. Crazy.
Thanks very much, Mielani Mkabela, Antsisa Management Group. I just want to find out from your social score. Your social score has increased with about 14%. But like looking in spite of the challenges that you have experienced, what are the key drivers for those?
The social score on the overall
yes,
JSE?
Your social score, like Anglo-American social score.
Yeah,
it increased by about 14% from 43.89 in 2012 to 57.1. It's about 14%.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I guess it's based on a whole range of the programs that we're actually doing on the social front. So, it's not just the fact that we are involved with CSI. It's the fact that the organization is actively managing all components of social management, and then actually integrating social management into the way we actually go about doing our business. So without seeing those or understanding exactly what those numbers are, I would imagine that's the underlying reason why that score has gone up.
Hi, Amy Goodwood.
Yeah,
Can you hear
it's
me?
fine. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, and I suppose it was in a way connected to that question about unscrupulous lending and I know that the bargaining environment is a very regulated one, but are there any changes that you foresee that you need to make, or any ideas about how your stakeholder engagement might change going forward now that this wage agreement has been reached?
So specifically engagement on unscrupulous lending and so on, or just generally?
Generally.
Yeah. So I mean, look, on the lending side, we're working with Department of Finance and National Treasury and stuff like that in dealing with unscrupulous lending. So, we've got active engagement with that stakeholder grouping where maybe 3 or 4 years ago we didn't have. But then, more generally, certainly, and no matter how you look at it, is that, a 5-month-long strike shows that there was something wrong in the business, and in the platinum sector. And we needed, as AngloAmerican Platinum, and I think the other platinum producers have said something similar, we need to take back our employees and actually really understand what the issues are on the ground, so that we're not just reliant on the unions and on the perspective from the unions. I think what had happened in the sector to some extent is that we had all relied too much on what the unions were saying back to us, and similarly expecting our message to be taken by the unions back to the employees. So we've got a far more active and program now in place, right through the organization, in engaging directly with our employees to actually understand what are the issues and how can we resolve them and test the temperature, and not just rely on, as I said, what's coming back from the union. So certainly that's one area that we've changed the way we engage, internally, and then also a lot more work on ensuring that the overall messaging within the company is also then getting to employees right down the line and is not necessarily being filtered out, by the unions. So it's taking engagement back from the unions with our own employees. And I mean, some of the unions might not like that, but first and foremost, they're our employees. And so we've had these engagements with the unions that's what we're now doing. Obviously, throughout the whole process, I think we're better at keeping government informed, and we've struck up certain relationships there now that we routinely engage on aspects of the business with government stakeholders and with others. So those are just some of the lessons.
Hi, Madi Chava from Trinitas Private, from Trinitas Private Equity. Just following on from that, I suppose it's just trying, from your perspective, in your opinion, do you think there's anything that could have been done? Well, avoiding the strike is one thing, but also just to shorten the length of that strike. In retrospect, I mean, when you look back, is there anything that could have been done differently?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, we're still digesting the whole process, and there's lots of advisors assisting the platinum industry in general about what could have been done differently. But I think it was a relatively unique sort of set of circumstances and complexities that were all at play at once. It was almost like the perfect storm. The industry was under immense financial pressure. The workers themselves were under, financial pressure. There was obviously the transformation objective, where the people of South Africa should be benefiting more from mining. So all of these issues were at play at once, and they just came to the fore at the beginning of this year. And look, it ultimately, and this is my view, the strike was ended when the new Minister of Mineral Resources obviously came in, mediated, didn't quite solve it, and said to UMCO there's nothing he can do further. And I think that was when the union itself realized that, that the position is what it is, and now an agreement has to be reached. So whether the Minister of Mineral Resources had have done that earlier and that had made a difference, it's difficult to speculate. But the bottom line is that we want to avoid it from happening again, and it can't happen again. And we really need to understand, why it happened, and engage with our employees to prevent it from happening again.